When you order a phone or a pair of shoes online today, it usually arrives on a massive cargo truck or ship. But long before paved highways and combustion engines, East Africa was already running an international supply chain. 200 years ago, local communities had already built a thriving economy. Instead of using cash, they relied entirely on barter, trading whatever they had in abundance for exactly what they needed. Look at these traditional evaporation ponds. The Banyoro people used sites exactly like this at Lake Katwe to mine salt. Since salt was highly prized for preserving meat, they could trade their local surplus with inland farmers in exchange for crops. Local barter worked beautifully for neighboring villages, but as foreign wealth arrived at the coast, connecting those regional markets to global trade meant finding a way to move cargo hundreds of miles across a roadless interior. The main challenge was pure distance. Foreign goods were piling up at coastal hubs like Mombasa, but the deepest, wealthiest African kingdoms were hundreds of miles inland across difficult terrain, and hiding in that terrain was a tiny, lethal roadblock. This is the tsetse fly. Its bite carried a parasite that caused sleeping sickness. This disease easily wiped out horses, donkeys, and oxen. Because of this fly, pack animals couldn't survive the journey inland. Without pack animals or navigable rivers, traders faced a harsh reality. If they wanted to build a global supply chain, every single piece of cargo would have to be carried by human beings. To understand why people would endure that journey, we have to look at what was arriving at the coast. Merchants were showing up from Arabia, Persia, and India, carrying exotic cargo. They didn't have engines either. Instead, they relied on a predictable weather pattern. Look at this map of the Indian Ocean. These arrows represent the monsoon winds. These winds blew steadily toward Africa for 6 months of the year. Merchants used wooden boats, known as dhows, like the one pictured here, to sail down to coastal hubs like Zanzibar. 6 months later, the winds reversed, blowing them right back to Asia. When those boats arrived, they unloaded manufactured goods that were entirely new to the region. They brought miles of soft cotton cloth and highly valued items exactly like these brightly colored glass trade beads. This sudden flood of foreign wealth created a powerful economic magnet. The coastal markets were overflowing, and African entrepreneurs realized that moving these goods into the deep interior could secure immense wealth. The solution was the East African long-distance trade. The goal was to bridge coastal hubs like Mombasa with kingdoms near Lake Victoria. 3 organized networks emerged: the Kamba in the north, the Nyamwezi in the center, and the Yao controlling the south. Since animals couldn't survive the tsetse flies, the vehicles on these routes were human caravans. Look closely at this photograph. Thousands of professional porters walked across hostile territory for months at a time. The physical toll was massive. Their most valuable export was harvested ivory, seen piled here. A single elephant tusk could weigh up to 30 kilograms, balanced on a porter's head for the entire walk to the ocean. And the terrain wasn't the only obstacle. To pass safely through different territories, caravan leaders had to pay a mandatory toll, known as hongo, to local chiefs. Without modern cash, they used an alternative currency. They paid tolls using strings of white cowrie shells, exactly like the one shown here. Through sheer physical endurance and complex negotiations, African organizers successfully linked isolated inland communities to a massive global trading network. Tapping into this supply chain generated immense wealth for the inland kingdoms that controlled the routes. Take Kabaka Mutesa I of Buganda, for example. He recognized the value of this central trade route and strategically managed the flow of goods to expand his kingdom's influence. Beyond beads and cloth, leaders like Mutesa traded ivory for foreign firearms, like these antique flintlock rifles. Injecting guns into traditional communities disrupted the existing balance of power. It triggered a regional arms race, allowing the groups with the most weapons to conquer their neighbors and build aggressive military empires. Then, the global market shifted, and the trade took a dark turn. As foreign demand for plantation labor spiked, ivory was overtaken by a far more horrific export: human beings. This created a brutal cycle. Inland chiefs used their newly imported guns to raid neighboring villages. They waged deadly wars specifically to capture prisoners, who were then chained together and sold into the East African slave trade. At the exact same time, the local economy collapsed. Look at this traditional process of making bark cloth. Local artisans had to abandon their generational crafts because they could not compete with the flood of cheap, factory-made foreign clothes and iron tools. Trade hubs like Tabora grew wealthy, but the rural interior paid the price. The constant slave raids stripped villages of their strongest farmers, leading to severe depopulation and famine. The long-distance trade routes connected East Africa to the global economy, but the immense human suffering, the spread of deadly weapons, and the decline of local industries left these communities drained and divided. They had built an incredible supply chain, only to find themselves weakened right as European colonizers arrived.